They laughed when I fell. My own daughter, my own son-in-law. I was lying at the bottom of the porch steps, my hip on fire, my wrist already swelling up like a rotten peach, and I heard it. That sound. Light, careless laughter, like they were watching a funny cat video on their phones, not like they were watching their mother, their family crash onto solid wood and harder earth. That was the moment I knew. The moment everything I tried not to see for years became clear as shattered glass. My name is Helen Cole. I'm 69 years old. I live at 214 Walnut Street in a gray siding bungalow I've owned for 43 years. And this is the story of how my family tried to break me and how I learned to stand up again. Before we begin, drop a comment below with your country and what time it is right now where you're watching. Whether it's sunrise in Nairobi, midnight in Australia, afternoon in Canada, or evening in France, I want to know. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't just sit back. Tell me where in the world you are. Now, let's dive into the story. It started with a dinner invite. My daughter, Lorna, called. She used that voice, you know the one. It pretends to be concerned, but it never reaches the eyes. "Mom, you need to get out of the house. It'll be good for you." I knew it wasn't about me. It was about her checking a box. Visit elderly mother. Check. But I went. I always went. You do that for your kids. You make excuses. You say they're busy, they're stressed. You ignore the little cuts, the little comments. Their house is nice, a modern split level on Cypress Lane, not like my old place. I parked my sensible sedan, a 2012 Honda Civic, blue, out front. I walked up the 5 steps to their porch. I held the railing, out of habit. The wood felt solid, old, worn, familiar. I'd climbed these stairs 100 times. I trusted them. Then, between one breath and the next, I heard it. Crack. A small, sharp sound, like a twig snapping. The railing gave way. It just collapsed under my hand. The world tilted. There was no time to catch myself. My body hit the steps, shoulder, hip, elbow, then the cold, hard slap of the driveway. The air rushed out of me. I lay there, stunned. I stared up at the underside of the porch like it was a strange, ugly sky. "Mom, are you... Oh my God, did you see that?" That was Lorna's voice breaking through the dizziness. And then the laughter. Her husband, Mark, it followed her words like a mean echo. Not loud, not cruel, not exactly. It was detached, amused, like he was watching a blooper reel. I tried to push up. My left arm trembled, useless. A sharp, hot pain shot up to my elbow. Someone should have rushed to me. Someone should have knelt down, touched my shoulder, asked if I was okay. But they didn't. They stood there, on the porch, above me. They whispered. I could hear them. "She just slipped," Mark said. "She does that." As if my whole life was one long, clumsy accident. I managed to sit up. The world swayed. My body screamed. But pride is a powerful thing. It pulls you upright even when your bones beg you not to move. "I'm fine," I said. My voice was steady. I wasn't fine. Lorna finally stepped forward. Her smile was tight, embarrassed. Not for me, for the scene I was making. "Mom, you scared us," she said. But her tone? It was all annoyance, no worry. "You really need to watch where you're going." I didn't answer. I was staring at the railing. A long, clean split ran through the wood. Too clean, too straight. I knew that porch. I'd painted that railing 2 summers ago. That break hadn't been there yesterday. It looked new. It looked wrong. Lorna didn't see me looking. She busied herself brushing invisible dust off my sleeve. "Let's get you inside," she said, hurrying, eager to get back to her perfect evening. I let her, because fighting would have taken more strength than I had right then. Inside, the lights were warm. The table was set. It smelled of roasted chicken and rosemary. It should have felt comforting, but it didn't. Everything looked faintly unreal, like I'd walked into a stranger's house wearing my own skin. We ate. They talked about things I didn't understand, work things, news things. I stayed quiet. My wrist throbbed, my hip ached. Later, when they were laughing at some joke I didn't hear, I slipped into the hallway alone. I pressed my swollen wrist against my chest. I breathed slowly. But what unsettled me wasn't the pain. It was the memory, that sharp crack, the fresh split in the wood, and a feeling, a cold, certain feeling deep in my gut. Something had been waiting for me the moment I put my hand on that railing. It wasn't an accident, and the way they laughed so easily, so quickly, it told me more than they ever meant to say. Did they laugh because it was funny, or because it went according to plan? The morning after the fall, the house was too quiet. It felt like it was holding its breath. I woke up before the sun. My body was stiff. A deep ache settled in my bones. When you're my age, pain moves in fast, like an old tenant reclaiming its room. I lay there. I let the ceiling come into focus. The weight of last night settled over me. It was heavier than any bruise. Getting out of bed was hard. Every movement was a reminder. The stairs, the crack, the laughter. I held on to the doorframe. I walked slow to the kitchen. The house felt different, sharper, like all its soft edges had been filed off overnight. Maybe it was me. Maybe I was finally seeing things clearly. I made tea. My hands shook. Water sloshed over the cup. I stood at the counter. I breathed. I waited for the trembling to stop. When it did, I walked to the porch window. The early light stretched across my floor. I could see the railing from there. Even from a distance, the split in the wood looked wrong. It was smooth, deliberate, not the fraying, splintered break you get from age and weather. This looked young and precise. The memory of that crack replayed in my head, clearer than anything else from the dinner. I've lived here for 43 years. I know every creak, every sigh of this house. That railing wasn't loose. The thought came, cold and unwelcome. What if someone did this? What if someone made it break? The idea was too big, too terrible, so I let it sit, like a quiet visitor in my mind I wasn't ready to talk to yet. The first doubt: was it really an accident? Around 9, the phone rang. It was Lorna. Her voice was bright, cheerful, too cheerful. "Morning, Mom. Feeling any better?" I heard dishes in the background, the hum of her kitchen, her life untouched by my fall. "I'm sore," I said. It was the truth. "My wrist is swollen." "Well," she said, and I could hear the shrug in her voice. "That's what happens when you don't hold the railing properly. You should have been more careful." I looked again at the broken wood outside my window. She hadn't even asked about it. She hadn't even seen it. Or maybe she had, and chose to ignore it. My daughter has always been selective with her vision. "You left in a hurry," she added. "We didn't get to finish dinner." "I was in pain," I said softly. "Yes, but you made it more dramatic than it needed to be." Her tone was sharp now. "Honestly, Mom, you're too sensitive lately." That stung. It stung deep. I swallowed her words. I let them pass me like a cold wind. "Is Mark home?" I asked. A pause. "Why?" I thought he might have noticed something about the railing. Another pause, longer this time, brittle. "There was nothing wrong with it," she said sharply. "You slipped, that's all." Her defensiveness, it settled over me like fine dust. It was revealing. "I should probably get my wrist checked," I said after a moment. "Do what you need to do. she replied. Her tone turned cold. "Just don't worry us with your ideas. You tend to overthink things." I thanked her. I hung up. The silence after felt heavier than before. I stood by the window. I stared at the damage. Overthinking. That's what she calls it when I notice things she wants left alone. Have you ever been told you're overreacting? I put on a sweater. I stepped outside. The air was crisp. It woke up my lungs. The railing looked even worse up close. The break wasn't from rot. No mildew, no splintering. The wood had been cut cleanly, recently, like someone took a saw to it. I touched the edge. It was smooth, sanded almost. My heart beat faster, not from fear, from recognition. I've spent decades fixing things around this house. My husband loved to build, but hated to maintain, so I learned. I know what a tool mark looks like. I know what natural aging looks like. And this was not it. I walked back inside slowly. I thought about last night. What if I'd hit my head? What if I'd landed wrong? What if I'd been just a little frailer? The thought left a coldness under my ribs, a hollow feeling. Just before noon, I opened my desk drawer, the one where I keep important papers. The envelope for my property documents was there, but it felt thin. I sifted through the papers once, twice. 2 sheets were missing, my deed and my homeowner's insurance policy. They weren't misplaced, they were gone. I sat down, hard. The realization settled into place, quiet, unmistakable. Someone had been on my porch before I arrived, and someone had been in my home after I left. I pressed my swollen wrist against my chest. I breathed slowly. At my age, people assume you don't notice things. They assume you forget. They assume wrong. Today, the truth was sharper than the pain. The clinic always smells the same, like disinfectant and old coffee. It reminded me of all the years I took my husband to his appointments, a place for fixing broken things. I sat in the waiting room. I held my wrist against my coat. I tried not to wince. A young mother with a toddler glanced at me, polite concern, but she didn't speak. People rarely speak to older women unless they have to. We become part of the furniture, invisible. The nurse called my name. I followed her down the hall. My steps were steady, but every movement carried yesterday's fall inside it, like I had swallowed the crash. She took my blood pressure. She asked if I'd been dizzy. "No," I said. "Dizziness is temporary." What I felt wasn't dizzy. It was a deep unease, a knowing. The doctor was a younger man, tired eyes, gentle hands. "Miss Cole, let's take a look." He rotated my wrist. Pain shot up my arm like a lightning bolt. I tightened my jaw. "Did you land directly on this hand?" he asked. "I fell backward," I said, "off a porch staircase. The railing broke." He looked up. "Broke how?" The question surprised me. Everyone else just assumed I'd tripped, my daughter, Mark, but he asked how. "It split," I answered, cleanly, like it had been cut. He raised an eyebrow, not mocking, attentive. "May I see a photo?" I didn't take one. "Can you describe it?" The wood was smooth at the break, not weathered, not rotten, just cut. He nodded slowly. He scribbled in my chart. "That doesn't sound like natural deterioration," he said quietly, "especially on a load-bearing railing." He set his pen down. "You didn't hit your head." "No." "Well, your wrist is moderately sprained, nothing broken." Relief washed through me, a small wave. He wrapped it carefully in a bandage. "I'll also note the details about the railing, just in case." "In case of what?" I asked softly. He hesitated. He chose his words with a respect I hadn't heard from my family in years. In case something about your fall wasn't accidental. My breath caught, not because the idea was new, but because someone else had said it out loud, someone who had no reason to doubt me. I don't want to alarm you, he continued, but if the damage was recent and deliberate, it should be documented. You may want to have someone inspect it. Someone like the police? I asked. I wasn't ready for the answer. He didn't say yes. He didn't need to. His silence said enough. The doctor sees it too. This is the first validation I'm not crazy. When I left the clinic, the wind stung my cheeks. I stood by the curb. I let the cold air clear my head. It's strange. A suspicion can live quietly inside you, but once it's spoken by someone else, it shifts. It becomes a truth. Yesterday, the broken railing was a whisper I could ignore. Today, it felt like a presence walking beside me. The bus ride home took forever. I watched my town through the window, the food mart where I shopped, the public library where I worked for 30 years, Hank's Hardware. Life moved on, indifferent. The world does not slow down for the discomfort of an old woman. I got off at my stop. I walked home slower than I meant to. The bandage throbbed, but pain wasn't the reason my heart beat heavy. It was the memory of Lorna's voice that morning, dismissive, impatient. You overthink things. And Mark hadn't spoken to me at all after the fall. He'd just hovered. He'd looked at the railing with an expression that looked too much like calculation. I remembered that now. It unsettled me. I paused at the bottom of my steps. The broken railing waited, quiet, keeping its secrets. I crouched down slowly. My hip protested. I ignored it. I examined the split again. Yesterday, I doubted myself. Today, I didn't. A cut like this doesn't happen on its own. I stood up carefully. I held the good railing. I climbed onto my porch. Inside, the house swallowed me in its familiar silence, but it didn't feel comforting anymore. It felt like a place where someone had been who shouldn't have. The missing papers, the clean cut, the laughter. These pieces were starting to form a shape, not a full picture, just an outline. But outlines are enough. They show you where the danger is. I sat at my kitchen table. I folded my bandaged hand in my lap. I breathed slowly. I wasn't ready to accuse anyone, not yet, but I knew what I had to do. Before the day ended, someone else would hear my story. I called the police. What will they find? The officers arrived just after 3. I heard the knock. I was at the kitchen table, my good hand around a mug of cold tea. The sound was deliberate, like the day itself had been waiting for this moment. 2 officers stood on my porch, a young woman with sharp, observant eyes and an older man with a kind, tired face. They introduced themselves politely, Officer Reyes and Officer Hammond. Their presence softened something in me, but my pulse still fluttered under my skin. "Miss Cole," Officer Reyes said, "we received a report about a fall on this property. We'd like to ask you a few questions." A report? So someone else had called. A neighbor, maybe, or the clinic. It didn't matter. I stepped aside. I let them in. The house felt almost embarrassed. The light fell in uncertain squares on the floor, like the house knew something had changed. We sat at the table. They waited, patient. They let me find the words. "I fell last night," I began. My voice was steady. My hands were not. Off the porch stairs. The railing gave way. Officer Reyes leaned forward slightly. "Can you describe exactly what happened?" So I told them. I didn't make it dramatic. I just told the truth. The crack, the fall, the laughter, Lorna's dismissive tone, the unnatural split in the wood. When I finished, the room was very still. The older officer, Hammond, nodded. "May we see the railing?" "Of course." I led them outside. I held the good railing. I stepped down slow. They examined the broken one with a seriousness that made my throat tight. Officer Reyes ran her fingers over the cut, just like I had. She looked at her partner. Her expression told me everything. I hadn't been imagining it. This cut is clean, too clean for natural wear, and recent. Officer Hammond bent down. No discoloration, no weathering. I felt a tremor go through me, recognition, a truth settling into its rightful place. "When did you last see it intact?" Hammond asked. "Yesterday morning," I said. "I sweep the porch. I would have noticed." Reyes nodded. "Have there been any signs of someone in your home, missing items?" My heart tightened. "Yes, some papers from my desk, property documents, my deed." "What kind of documents?" she asked gently. "My deed, insurance papers." Their eyes met. Not in a dramatic way. It was a professional look, people who see a pattern forming. "Miss Cole," Officer Hammond said, "is there anyone who might want those documents? Anyone who might benefit from having them?" The name sat in my mind, heavy. It's a shameful thing. To admit harm might come from your own family. It goes against every instinct. A mother protects, even when the cost is herself. "My daughter and her husband were here," I said finally, "before the fall and after." They didn't rush me. Officer Reyes tilted her head, encouraging, patient. "Do you believe they took the papers?" Believe was a strong word, but suspect, yes, I suspected a great many things now. "I don't want to accuse anyone without reason," I said quietly, "but the timing is troubling." "We understand," Hammond said. "You're not accusing, you're providing information." He stood, he walked the porch, he took photos, meticulous, careful. Officer Reyes stayed beside me. "Miss Cole," she said gently, "falls like this with structural damage are taken seriously. We'll file a report. We may need to speak with your family." My chest tightened, not for me, but with the memory, their laughter, the casual cruelty wrapped in amusement. What would they say when questioned? Would they lie? Would they laugh again? "I want the truth," I said. My voice was soft but firm. "Whatever it is." "You'll have it," she replied. They left a few minutes later. They promised to update me. I stood on the porch. I watched their car disappear down Walnut Street. I touched the broken railing one more time. The wood was cold. It felt like it was holding the memory of what happened. I went inside. The silence returned. But it was a different silence. It carried a new weight, the weight of a beginning, the beginning of something bigger than a fall, bigger than pain. It carried the shape of an investigation. The police are involved. What will happen when they talk to Lorna and Mark? After the officers left, the house felt heavier, not from fear, but because their questions lingered in the air. They stirred up things I'd kept tucked away for years, like poking a sleeping animal. I sat in my old armchair. My wrist throbbed. I let the quiet settle over me. Memories don't come in order. They come in feelings. The weight of a child's head on your shoulder, the sharp sound of a slammed door, laughter that isn't kind. I thought of Lorna, my Lorna, when she was small, small enough to reach for my hand without thinking. She spoke softly then. Her eyes were gentle. There was a warmth to her, a warmth that hadn't learned to measure love in terms of convenience. But children grow. The world teaches them things you never would. By the time she was in her 20s, that softness had hardened. It became something brisk, impatient. She loved me, I know she did, but it became a quiet love, conditional, trimmed at the edges, careful not to get in the way of her own life. And then came Mark. I never disliked him, not at first. He had a charm, but it was the thin kind, the kind that fades fast once you see there's nothing behind it. He always called me ma'am, even after I asked him to call me Helen. That tiny distance, that tiny barrier, it was the first sign, but you ignore signs when you want your child to be happy. I learned slowly. painfully. Mark's charm was for everyone except the people he didn't need. Over the years, I saw Lorna change. She started using his tone. She spoke to me with a clipped politeness, like motherhood was a job I'd done okay at but had since retired from. Birthdays felt like obligations. Holidays were hurried. My presence in their lives shrank, not with cruelty, with neglect. Neglect is a softer thing, but it cuts just as deep. Some nights I'd sit in this same chair, I'd listen to the wind, I'd wonder, when did I become someone they guided instead of greeted? When did I become someone they corrected instead of listened to? When did they start expecting me to understand everything without ever understanding me? I'm not naive. I know aging changes things. Children step forward, parents step back. But stepping back shouldn't mean vanishing. And yet, that's what I became, a shadow in their doorway, convenient to invite when they wanted an audience, inconvenient when they needed patience. The comments started last year. Little comments, dropped lightly but with intention. Mom, you shouldn't handle finances alone anymore. It's not safe to keep important papers in the house. You worry too much about things that don't matter. Remarks that landed like feathers but gathered inside me like stones. They made me doubt myself. Doubt is a cruel friend. It creeps in. It rearranges the furniture in your mind. But the fall, the laughter, that was different. There was no doubt in that moment. The worst part wasn't the fall. It was how easily they dismissed it, how quickly they stepped back, how they let amusement take the place of concern. When people show you what you mean to them, you should pay attention. I hadn't, not fully. I'd always made excuses, busy lives, work stress. But excuses wear thin. They wear thin when you're lying at the bottom of a staircase, listening to your own daughter tell you to be more careful. Sitting in my living room, I felt the weight of all the small hurts I'd tolerated, not out of weakness, but because love tricks you. It persuades you to accept less than you deserve. You believe it's temporary. You believe it will be repaid someday. But love shouldn't make you a fool. And there's a quiet humiliation in realizing how far you've bent to keep peace in a family that doesn't see you anymore. My tea was cold. I held the mug anyway. Outside, the porch creaked in the wind, a normal sound. But tonight it frightened me, because I knew now. Wood doesn't split itself, papers don't disappear, and laughter says everything people are too afraid to say out loud. The past reveals the pattern. This was a long time coming. The next morning began with a phone call. I didn't recognize the number. I usually let those go to voicemail, but after the police visit, every ring felt important. I picked up. "Miss Cole," a man asked. His voice was formal. "This is Daniel Hart from Midland Savings Bank. We're calling to verify an online request we received last night. Are you available to confirm some details?" "A request?" My chest tightened. "What kind of request?" "A password reset and a new device authorization. It appears someone tried to access your accounts remotely. Before we proceed, we need to confirm that this was you." "It wasn't me," I said quietly. A pause on his end. I heard paper shuffling. "I'm afraid someone attempted to access your account using personal information, your address, date of birth, partial social security number, and the answer to a security question." My breath slowed. "Which question?" "Your daughter's middle name." I closed my eyes. Lorna's middle name is Elizabeth. It's not something a stranger would know. It's not something you'd guess. "Miss Cole, we've blocked the attempts," he continued gently, "but we strongly recommend you change your login credentials. And, may I ask, has anyone else had access to your home recently?" His question hung in the air. It mixed with the morning light coming through my window. I looked at my desk drawer, the thin folder, the missing papers. "Yes," I said. My daughter and her husband were here. Another pause, a longer one. I understand. We can set up additional security. It would require in-person verification for major changes at a branch. Yes, I said. My voice was firm. Please do that. When I hung up, the house felt different, invaded, not just unsettled. I walked into the living room, slowly, like the walls might have answers. They didn't. They only reflected back the truth I'd tried to not see. Someone wanted my accounts. Someone wanted my documents. Someone knew the exact question my bank would ask. And still, a part of me resisted. The mother part. You don't spend a lifetime loving a child only to believe easily that they could hurt you, even if the hurt is quiet, digital, hidden behind buttons instead of fists. I made tea. My hands trembled. The steam fogged my glasses. I let the world blur for a minute. I sat down. I tried to think step by step, the way I used to help students in the library outline research. Fact. Someone was in my house. Fact. They took specific papers. Fact. They tried to access my bank. Fact. The railing was cut. Each fact alone could be explained away, a coincidence, an accident, a mistake. Together, they formed a cold hand pressing against my spine. Around noon, I called the police. I asked for Officers Reyes and Hammond. I told them about the bank call, the missing papers, the security question. They listened carefully. Officer Reyes spoke. That kind of activity, Miss Cole, often connects to attempts to claim property or redirect assets. We take it seriously. Can you come to the station later this week? We'll need a formal statement. I thanked her. The words felt thin. Serious wouldn't soften the truth. It wouldn't change what was already happening. After the call, I sat for a long time. I watched the light move across my floor. I listened to the wind. I remembered Lorna as a little girl, how she'd rest her head on my shoulder when she was tired, how she once drew a picture of this house. She said, "This is where you'll always live, Mommy." A child's promise, unaware of the weight those words would carry one day. I touched the bandage on my wrist. It pulsed, a sore, stubborn reminder. My body knew how to warn me even when my heart hesitated. They laughed when I fell. They looked away when I stood. But the truth wasn't looking away anymore, and neither was I. The bank confirms it. This is financial. What are they trying to steal? I never thought I'd need a lawyer, not for something like this. Lawyers are for big estates, complicated contracts, not for family matters, not for your own child. But that morning, sitting at my kitchen table, I knew I was already in a fight I didn't choose. It chose me the moment that railing cracked. The law office was a few blocks from the old library. Walking there felt strange, like walking back into a life that had slipped behind me. The receptionist was polite, warm in the way people are with elderly clients who aren't expected to cause trouble. I sat in a soft chair. I waited. Mr. Alden came out to meet me. He was in his 60s, older but not old. His eyes softened when they saw my bandage. "Miss Cole," he said, shaking my good hand. "Come in. What can I help you with?" It took me a moment to speak. Saying the words would make it all real. Something's been happening, and I need to understand my options. He nodded. He invited me to continue. So I told him. I didn't share every emotion. I kept those tucked behind my ribs. I gave him the facts, steady and in order. The fall, the clean break, the missing deed, the bank. He listened. He didn't look disbelieving or impatient. He leaned closer, like he was drawing the truth out from between my words. When he finished, he exhaled slowly. "Miss Cole, this is serious." I suspected as much. He opened a folder. "You mentioned property documents. Your deed?" "Yes." And has your signature been required for anything recently? Transfers, refinancing? No. And you haven't granted power of attorney to anyone? Absolutely not. He tapped his pen. Then someone may be trying to position themselves to make decisions about your assets. It often starts with collecting documents and personal information. Sometimes it escalates to structural tampering if someone wants to create a scenario where a person appears fragile or incapable. The room felt small. The air felt heavy. You mean, you said slowly, to make me look incompetent? In some cases, yes, he said gently, or to hasten a change, assisted living, for example, where control can shift quickly. My stomach turned to stone. I thought of Lorna's words, "You shouldn't handle finances alone anymore." I thought of Mark hovering on the porch, hands in his pockets, too calm. "What can I do?" I asked. "First, we protect you. You've started that. Next, document everything. And finally," he paused. He chose his words with care. "We file a formal alert with Adult Protective Services. It's not an accusation, it's a safeguard." I felt a sting behind my eyes. I refused to cry. "I never thought it would come to this." "No one does," he said softly, "but you're doing the right thing." He helped me with the forms. His questions were respectful. His tone was calm. He never made me feel foolish or dramatic. When we were done, he gave me copies in a neat envelope. "One more thing, Miss Cole," he added. "I suggest changing the locks on your home, today if possible." The idea startled me. My house, my safe place, old and worn but loyal. "Do you think they'd come back?" "I think," he said, "someone already has." I left his office. I held the envelope against my chest. The afternoon light was cool. It was the kind of light that reveals more than it hides. I walked slowly home. Each step carried the weight of a truth I could no longer soften. People talk about getting older like it means fading away, but in that moment I felt more visible than I had in years. The world had sharpened, not blurred. I wasn't afraid of the investigation. I was afraid of what it would confirm. A lawyer confirms the danger. Now I have to change my locks. Will they come back before I do it? The officers returned 2 days later, just after noon. I heard their car door shut. Low, steady voices, the kind people use when they already know more than they're saying. I opened the door. I braced myself on the good railing. Officer Reyes gave me a small nod. Her expression was gentler. Officer Hammond carried a clipboard and a small evidence bag. They looked like they were here to deliver answers. Answers I wasn't sure I was ready to hear. "Miss Cole," Reyes said softly, "may we come in?" I let them in. The house felt different with them there, like the old rooms were finally exhaling. They stood in my living room, their eyes scanned, not rude, just aware of how danger can hide in ordinary places. "We've completed our preliminary assessment," Hammond began. "The cut in the railing was deliberate. Tool marks indicate a fine-toothed saw was used." A saw. My stomach tightened. The truth was no surprise, but hearing it out loud was different. "Do you know anyone," Reyes asked carefully, "who has access to your property and might use such a tool?" "My son-in-law," I said. My voice felt small but steady. "Mark. He keeps tools in his truck. He's done small repairs here before." Reyes nodded slowly, gathering pieces. "We also reviewed a neighbor's security footage," she added. That caught my breath. I didn't know the Millers next door had a camera. "It only points at their driveway," she said, "but it captures part of your street. It recorded someone approaching your porch the afternoon before your fall." The room got colder. "Who?" I asked. "We're verifying the image," Hammond said, "but it appears to be a male, adult, medium build." Mark, the thought came instantly, without softness, but I didn't say his name. Not yet. I needed their truth, not mine. "There's something else," Reyes said. Her voice grew quieter, gentler, like someone handing you something fragile. She held out the evidence bag. Inside was a single sheet of paper, my property deed, the original. I stared at it. Part of me wanted to believe it had been found somewhere innocent, misplaced, but my drawer had been opened, the bank had been called. My daughter's voice echoed. "You really shouldn't handle finances alone anymore." She'd been practicing a line meant to sound caring, but serving another purpose. "Where did you find it?" I asked. "In the trash behind your daughter's house," Hammond said. A long silence filled the room. It built slowly, like snow piling on a branch, until everything bends under the weight. I sat down. My legs felt unreliable. I traced the outline of the document through the plastic. It felt like a map leading somewhere I didn't want to go. "We're not drawing conclusions yet," Rhea said gently, "but the pattern concerns us. The railing, the documents, the bank. You were right to contact us." Right. I hadn't been right in my family's eyes for a long time. Hearing it now was strange. It was both comforting and painful. "We'll be interviewing your daughter and her husband officially," Hammond said. "We'll notify you." Something in me resisted, not because they didn't deserve it, but because I knew people like them. I knew how they could twist a story, especially when the other person is an old woman with a sprained wrist and a quiet voice. "Will they know I gave you this information?" I asked. "Not unless it becomes necessary," Reyes replied. Their kindness steadied me. I saw no condescension in their eyes, only professionalism, and a protective clarity that made the room feel safer. After they left, I stayed by the window. I watched their car pull away. The house was impossibly still. A breeze lifted the curtains. It carried the smell of grass and old wood. Winter was coming. I thought of Lorna as a child, her small hand in mine. No hesitation. The drawings she taped to my refrigerator, the softness she carried before life or marriage reshaped her into someone harder. I pressed my hand against the window pane. The glass was cool. The truth wasn't circling me anymore. It was walking straight towards me, step by step, unhurried, undeniable. And I, for the first time in years, wasn't stepping aside. "The deed is found in their trash. This is almost over. What will they say when confronted?" I hadn't meant to call my granddaughter. Truly, I hadn't. There's a pride that comes with age, a reluctance to burden the young with your troubles. But that evening, as the light faded and the house pressed its silence on me, I dialed her number without thinking. Amelia answered on the second ring. "Grandma, everything all right?" Her voice was warm, young, unguarded, like her mother's voice used to be. "I'm all right," I said. The words felt fragile. "I just wanted to hear your voice." A pause, soft and thoughtful. "Mom said you had a little accident. Are you really okay?" "Just sore," I replied, more bruised pride than anything. She laughed gently, but the sound faded fast. "You don't sound like yourself." It's amazing how children hear what adults train themselves to ignore. "There's been some trouble," I admitted, "but I don't want to drag you into it." "You don't have to drag me," she said quietly. "I'm here." So I told her, not everything, not the full weight, but enough. The fall, The cut railing, the missing papers, the bank call. Her silence grew heavier with each detail. "Grandma," she finally whispered, "I've noticed things for a long time. The way Mom talks to you, the way Mark decides things for her, about you, about your house, your money. I didn't want to think it meant anything." "You're young," I said softly. "You're supposed to think the best of people." "Maybe," she replied, "but I don't think the best of Mark. I never have." Her words settled over me like a blanket, a warm, painful, comforting blanket. I'd spent years excusing things I didn't want to name, but children have a way of naming the truths adults only circle around. "Did they ever say anything to you?" I asked. "About me?" Another long pause. "Not directly, but Mom said once it was time for you to accept help and stop being stubborn. Mark said you were too trusting with your papers. They talked like you were slowing down." Slowing down. The phrase stung, not because it wasn't partly true, but because of how easily it could become an excuse to take from someone. "Grandma," Amelia continued, her voice firmer, "I don't care what they think. I know you. You're not forgetful, and you're not helpless." "Thank you," I whispered. "It means more than you know." She hesitated. "Do the police think someone did this on purpose?" "Yes," I said quietly. "They do." Another silence. When she spoke again, her voice trembled with something like anger. "If Mom and Mark are involved, I don't know what I'll do." "You'll do what you've always done," I said. I steadied my voice the way I once steadied her small hands when she learned to write. "You'll stay kind, you'll stay clear. This isn't your burden." "But you're my grandmother. I care about you more than anyone." I closed my eyes. I let her words settle into the parts of me that had gone cold over the years. For the first time since the fall, I didn't feel alone. "Come by tomorrow," I said softly, "if you can." "I will," she promised. "I'm not letting you go through this by yourself." When we hung up, the house didn't feel so hollow. Someone was still standing with me, and sometimes one heart is enough to steady another. "My granddaughter is on my side, but can I trust her? Will she tell her mother?" The next morning, I woke with a steadiness I hadn't felt in years. Not strength. Strength is a younger woman's word. This was clarity, and clarity at my age is far more powerful. It doesn't shout, it doesn't rush, it settles into your bones, and it begins to rearrange the world around you. I sat at the kitchen table with my tea. I watched the steam curl in the sunlight. All the small humiliations of the last few years drifted through my mind. The comments about my memory, the pressure to let go of my home, the little sighs of impatience when I didn't agree fast enough. I had accepted those things, the way you accept a drafty window, an annoyance that becomes part of the house if you let it. But the fall changed something. It wasn't just the pain or the laughter. It was the realization. I had spent years adjusting myself to keep the peace without ever asking if that peace was serving me at all. So I took out a pad of paper. I began making a list. I wrote slowly, deliberately. Each decision felt like a knot I was finally untying. First, the monthly transfers to Lorna. They started small, $20 here, $50 there, little gifts to help when she was struggling. Somehow they became expected, then required. I logged into my bank account online. I canceled every single automatic transfer. The confirmation message popped up. Transfers canceled. It felt comforting, like closing a door that had been left open too long. Second, the emergency credit card. I'd given her years ago, for just in case. I called the credit card company. I removed her name from the account. The representative asked if I wanted to add someone else. I told him no. My voice didn't waver. Third, the spare house key. the one they used to let themselves in whenever they pleased, dropping by when I wasn't home, acting like my space was partly theirs. I stood at my front door. I held the key in my hand. I felt the weight of all the times I'd pretended not to notice their footprints in my life. I put the key in a drawer, then I called a locksmith. I scheduled him for that afternoon. Fourth, my will. It had been untouched for years, written when my family felt whole. I looked at the envelope on my bookshelf. A strange calm settled over me. A will isn't punishment, it's a reflection, and reflections can change when the light shifts. Mr. Alden would help me revise it. I would make sure my choices were thoughtful, not emotional, but they would be my choices. As I moved through the house, a quiet resolve followed me, room to room. I wasn't angry. Anger is hot. It cools too fast. What I felt was steadier, like the slow, sure tightening of a thread being pulled back into place. Around noon, Amelia arrived, a gentle tap on the door, like she was asking the house for permission. I opened it. She looked at me with a softness that nearly undid me. "You look different," she said. "Sharper." "Do I?" I smiled. "Maybe I'm just finally awake." We sat in the living room, sunlight stretched across her knees. I told her calmly about the steps I'd taken. She listened without interrupting. Her eyes grew brighter, not with sadness, with pride. "Good," she said when I finished. "You're protecting yourself." "I should have done it sooner," I murmured. "Maybe," she replied, "but you're doing it now." Her certainty steadied me more than anything had in weeks. Before she left, she squeezed my good hand. "Whatever happens next," she said, "you're not alone." I watched her walk down the path. Her figure was small against the afternoon light. For the first time in years, the house felt like it belonged wholly to me again, not because the walls changed, but because I had changed. And once a woman stops being convenient, she becomes something far more powerful. She becomes herself. I'm cutting them off, taking back control. How will they react? Lorna arrived just after sunset. People do that when they hope the darkness will make things seem softer, less deliberate. I saw her through the window before she knocked. She was pacing, smoothing her hair, squaring her shoulders. She wasn't rehearsing an apology. My daughter never rehearses apologies. She rehearses control. I opened the door before she could knock. She stepped inside quickly, like she was afraid I'd change my mind. "Mom," she said. Her voice was tight. "We need to talk." I nodded. I led her to the living room. She didn't sit until I did, a small detail, but telling. Her eyes swept the room. They paused on the new lockbox on my table. I saw a flicker in her expression, faint, wary. Then she smoothed it away. "I heard you went to a lawyer," she began. Her tone was light, forced, "and that you've been making changes." "I have," I said. A beat of silence. Then she inhaled sharply. "Mom, don't you think that's a little dramatic? You could have talked to me first." "I've tried talking," I replied. My voice wasn't loud, but it seemed to fill the room in a way hers didn't, for years. She crossed her arms, a defensive move she learned from Mark. "You canceled the transfers, the card, you changed the locks. Do you know how that looks?" "Yes," I said. "It looks like I'm protecting myself." Her mouth tightened. "From your own family?" I looked at her. I really looked. The stiffness in her jaw, the impatience in her eyes, the way she leaned forward, not from concern, from calculation, like someone preparing a negotiation they assumed they'd win. "Lorna," I said quietly, "someone cut my railing." Her face went still, too still. "And someone entered my home without my knowledge. Someone took my deed. Someone tried to access my bank account." She didn't deny it. She didn't even gasp. She just blinked slowly, buying time for her thoughts to rearrange. "Mom," she said finally. Her voice trembled. "Please, don't make things worse." I folded my hands, one bandaged, one steady. I looked at my daughter with a calm she couldn't touch. "I'm not making things worse," I said. "I'm just not letting things continue." She stared at me. She realized slowly that the version of me she was used to, the compliant, apologetic mother, wasn't sitting here anymore. The house felt different around us, wider, stronger, my house, my life, and she seemed suddenly very small within it. The confrontation. I stood my ground. What will Lorna do now? 3 days passed. Then the police called again. I expected it, but the ring still startled me. Official calls have a way of tightening the air. Officer Reyes asked if they could stop by. Her tone held no urgency, but no softness either. It was the voice of someone carrying facts. When they arrived, I invited them into the kitchen. Afternoon light made long rectangles on the floor. My kettle whistled gently. The ordinariness of it felt like a small anchor. "Miss Cole," Hammond began, "we've completed our interviews with your daughter and her husband." He paused, letting me brace. "Their accounts raised concerns." Reyes opened a folder. The paper rustled. A simple sound, heavy in moments like this. "First," she said, "Mark admitted he was on your porch the day before your fall. He claims he came to drop off a borrowed ladder." I let out a slow breath. A ladder, a tidy explanation, smooth as a polished stone. "He didn't mention this initially," she added. "Of course he hadn't. Mark never offers information unless pressed." "Second," Hammond said, "his fingerprints were found on the cut section of the railing." My fingers tightened around my mug, not in shock, in confirmation, like hearing out loud what my bones already knew. "He said," Reyes continued, "he touched it after you fell when checking for damage. But the prints," Hammond added quietly, "were underneath the break, on the inner surface." I felt something inside me settle, a sad kind of certainty. When truth arrives, it rarely feels victorious. It feels inevitable. "There's more," Reyes said. "We obtained a warrant for Mark's financial searches. He looked up property transfers, accelerated home sales in the days before your fall." My heart tightened. The missing deed, the bank call, the laughter, it all connected. "And," she added, her voice even softer, "he searched for how to determine mental competency of an elder family member." That one hit the hardest, not because I believed it, but because I saw the full shape of their intention, the future they were building for me, without my voice, without my consent. Hammond looked at me with steady eyes. "Miss Cole, we believe there's enough evidence for charges: attempted financial exploitation and reckless endangerment." Attempted, a small word for something that could have killed me. I nodded. My throat felt tight. "What happens now?" "We forward everything to the district attorney," Reyes said. "You may be asked to give a fuller statement. We'll keep you updated." I thanked them. Gratitude wasn't the right word. I wasn't relieved. The truth has weight, even when you want it. It sits on your chest in a new shape, and you have to learn how to breathe around it. After they left, I stood by the porch window. The broken railing was gone. Temporary boards were in its place. But in my mind, I saw the fall, not my body hitting the steps. I barely remembered that. What stayed was their laughter, the way they stood above me, unbothered, almost amused. Some wounds don't bruise the skin, they bruise the soul. I leaned my hand against the cool glass. The investigation had passed its turning point. It was no longer about suspicion. It was about proof. And proof, I was learning, can be both a burden and a freedom. The evidence is overwhelming.
Charges are coming. What will the court do? The district attorney's office asked me to come in. The letter wasn't for a hearing, not yet, but the tone was clear. Things had moved beyond concerns. I arrived early. I sat in a hallway outside a conference room. I could hear muffled voices. When they called me in, Lorna and Mark were already there, seated at the far end of a long, polished table. Seeing them in that cold municipal room felt strange, like looking at strangers wearing familiar skin. Lorna's face was drawn tight, her fingers twisted a tissue. Mark looked composed, polite, a man convinced he could talk his way out of anything. I sat opposite them. I folded my hands on the table. The officers were there. A young assistant district attorney led the questioning. She was sharp, professional. "Mrs. Cole," she began, "thank you for coming." She explained the process. I might hear statements. I wasn't required to respond. It was strange, being protected from my own family. Strange and steadying. The ADA turned to Mark. "Mr. Benton, your fingerprints were found under the cut on the railing. Explain." Mark cleared his throat. He offered a small, agreeable smile. "As I said, I inspected it after the fall. I must have touched underneath without realizing." Hammond leaned forward. "These prints were on a surface impossible to reach without sawing through first." Mark's smile thinned. "Then they must not be mine." "We verified them twice," Reyes said calmly. A brittle silence. The ADA continued. "Your internet history shows repeated queries about rapid property transfer from a relative and steps for declaring mental competency. Do you deny this?" Mark's jaw moved. A muscle twitched. "People look up all kinds of things. It doesn't mean anything." "It does," Reyes said, "when your mother-in-law's deed is in your trash." Lorna flinched. The ADA turned to her. "Miss Benton, did you know the deed was in your trash?"
Lorna hesitated. Not confusion, calculation, weighing which version of the truth would hurt less. I didn't know," she said finally. Her voice was small. "Mark handles the bills. I assumed—" "You assumed what?" The ADA pressed gently. Lorna's eyes flicked to me. Something passed over her face. Guilt. Fear. The realization that the scaffolding she'd leaned on was collapsing. "I assumed he knew what he was doing," she whispered. The room went very still. I watched them. My daughter and the man she chose, sitting side by side but drifting apart with each question. Their confidence was gone, replaced by something sharper, more desperate. I didn't feel anger, not even betrayal, just a deep, steady sadness for what they had allowed themselves to become. The ADA closed her folder. "We will be moving forward with formal charges." Mark exhaled sharply, a brittle sound. Lorna lowered her head. I did not gloat. I did not look away. I simply breathed, the slow, full breath of someone finally standing in the open after years in the shadows. As we left, their eyes followed me, not with amusement, not with dismissal, not with impatience. For the first time in a very long time, they looked at me with fear. Lorna's admission, "The case is solid. Next stop, court." The hearing itself was brief. After weeks of slow-moving truth, the courtroom felt strangely hollow. The judge listened, he nodded, he made notes. The attorney spoke in calm, controlled voices. I sat with my hands folded. I felt neither victorious nor defeated, simply awake. Mark stood beside his lawyer. He shifted constantly, like the floor wouldn't settle under him. Lorna sat a step behind, pale, trembling. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. The shrinking was somewhere deep inside. The charges were read aloud. Attempted financial exploitation, reckless endangerment, unlawful tampering. The words didn't echo. They didn't sting. They just existed, solid, unarguable, like a door finally closing. The judge reviewed the evidence, the fingerprints, the footage, The deed, the bank attempts, the searches. With each item, Mark's confident sheen wore thinner. He looked like a man caught in the center of his own undoing. Then the judge spoke to me. "Mrs. Cole, do you wish to speak before I issue the protective order?" I stood slowly. My bones felt steady. "Yes, Your Honor." The room quieted. Even Mark stilled. "I am not here for revenge," I said. My voice didn't waver. "And I am not here to punish my daughter or her husband. I am here because I fell down stairs that should have never broken. I am here because someone cut them. I am here because documents went missing from my home, and because I was laughed at when I needed help." My gaze drifted, not accusing, just remembering. I have lived my life quietly. I never asked for much. But dignity, I added softly, should not be something a woman my age has to defend. A tremble passed over Lorna's face. She looked down. Her hands were knotted. "I do not hate my daughter," I continued, "but I will not excuse what she allowed. I will not excuse what her husband did." Silence, heavy and respectful. When I sat, the judge nodded. It felt like acknowledgement, not routine. He granted the protective order. Mark was forbidden from coming near me or my home. Further charges would proceed. Lorna was not charged, but she was formally instructed to stay out of my affairs, unless invited in writing. The gavel struck, a sound that ended more than the hearing. As people stood, Lorna approached me, hesitant. "Mom," she whispered, "please, we can fix this." I looked at her. I looked at the woman she'd become, at the remnants of the child she was, at the distance between the two. "It's not something that broke overnight," I said quietly, "and it won't mend with one apology." Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't reach for her. Compassion and boundaries can coexist. I was learning that now. Mark didn't speak to me. He didn't look at me. He walked past, stiff, clipped, a man who believed shame was beneath him, yet carried it anyway. Outside the courthouse, the air was cool and clean. I breathed it in slowly. It settled into me, the way courage sometimes does, quietly, without ceremony. Nothing had ended, really, but something had shifted. For the first time in a very long time, my life was back in my own hands. Justice is served, but my family is broken. Can there ever be healing? The house felt different when I got home. Nothing inside had changed. The same old rug, the same bowing bookshelf, the same kettle on the stove, but the air felt clearer, like the house had been holding its breath for years and finally let it out. I hung up my coat. I stood there. I listened. There's a silence that feels empty, and there's a silence that feels earned. This one felt earned. I brewed tea slowly. The old familiar motion settled my bones. My wrist still ached. The sprain lingered, but the ache didn't feel like a reminder of the fall anymore. It felt like a reminder that I had stood up afterwards, even when the people who should have helped me laughed instead. I carried my tea to the porch. The new railing was finished. Plain, stained oak. Sturdy. The breeze touched my face gently, like a greeting. For the first time since the fall, I sat outside without feeling watched, without feeling unsafe. I thought of Lorna, the way her shoulders collapsed in the courtroom, the way her eyes avoided mine. And old part of me, the mother part, wanted to reach out, to soften the hard thing between us. But love can't mend what truth has shattered, not immediately, and not without willingness on both sides. She wasn't ready. Maybe she never would be. But I no longer felt responsible for the path she chose. A mother can guide a child, but she cannot walk their life for them. Not at 5 years old, not at 48. I looked down the street. Amelia would visit soon. She'd texted. She asked if I wanted company. I told her no, not tonight. I needed a few hours with myself. She understood. She has a way of listening that doesn't need words. The sun drifted lower. It touched the rooftops in a soft amber glow. The world went on. A dog barked, a car door slammed, faint laughter from a house that wasn't mine. Life continued, and I was still here to meet it. I used to think aging meant shrinking into smaller rooms, smaller expectations, a smaller version of yourself. But I've learned something these past weeks. Age can also be an expansion, a widening of clarity, a refusal to be nudged aside. A refusal to be nudged aside simply because others find your dignity inconvenient. I touched the new railing. It was smooth under my fingers. My porch was repaired. My accounts were secured. My will was rewritten, carefully, thoughtfully. My days felt more my own than they had in years. Mark would face what he'd earned. Lorna would have to live with what she allowed, and I, in my quiet corner of the world, had reclaimed a simple truth, a truth that had slipped from me over time. A woman does not disappear just because others stop seeing her. I finished my tea as the sun dipped behind the trees. Evening settled in, soft and open. Tomorrow I would bake bread. The day after I might volunteer at the library again. Small things, ordinary things, but done freely, on my terms. Freedom at 69 doesn't look like it did at 20. It looks calmer. It feels firmer. It's a hand that no longer trembles when it reaches for its own life. And if anyone ever laughs at me again, it will not be because I let them. It will be because they forgot to look closely. They forgot to see the strength in the quiet, the fire in the calm. They forgot that some women, especially the older ones, have roots that go deep, and we have learned, finally, how to stand our ground. Thank you for listening to my story, for sitting with me on this porch. Wherever you are in the world, whatever you're facing, remember this. Honor your own dignity. Protect your boundaries. Listen to that quiet voice inside you that says, this is wrong. It's not being sensitive, it's being strong. Your story isn't over until you say it is. Don't let anyone else write the ending for you. Now go live it, and remember, you are never too old to stand back up. If this story resonated with you, please don't hesitate to like this video and subscribe to this channel so we can share more with each other. Please leave a comment and let me know where you're watching from.